Hello and welcome back. If you're here, you probably already know the drill. Get comfortable, dim the lights if you haven't already, and just let this wash over you. Tonight we're talking about Dexter. Specifically, we're talking about the kills. The ones that landed just right. The ones where you let out a slow breath and thought, yes, that was the one. And I want to be clear up front about what I mean when I say satisfying, because I think it's worth a moment. We're not talking about violence for its own sake. Dexter was never really a show about violence, even though it was technically always about violence, if that makes sense. What the show was actually about was ritual and order, and this deeply strange comfort that came from watching someone do something terrible in a very methodical, very specific way to people who had done worse. There's a reason millions of people watched 8 seasons of a show about a serial killer and came away feeling like they'd spent time with someone they genuinely liked. That's not an accident. That's craft. So when I talk about satisfying kills, I mean the ones where all of those threads came together, where the build-up paid off, where you understood completely why that particular person ended up on that particular table. The ones where even the show itself seemed to exhale a little. There's also a version of this that's about the victim, and I'll use that word loosely, and how much the show made you dislike them before the inevitable. Some of these people are season-long antagonists who've done awful things across 10, 12 episodes. Some are one-off monsters who barely got 15 minutes of screen time before Dexter figured out what they were. And sometimes the most satisfying kills aren't even the biggest ones. Sometimes it's a quiet, clinical moment that works because of exactly how small and precise it is. Now, if you've never watched Dexter or you've only seen bits of it, a quick bit of context before we get going. Dexter Morgan works as a blood spatter analyst for the Miami Metro Police Department. He's good at it, actually. Unnervingly good, which makes sense when you find out why. Dexter is also a serial killer, has been since he was roughly 20 years old, when his adoptive father, Harry, a Miami homicide detective, gave Dexter permission to act on what he was, and made a decision that would define everything that followed. Rather than turn Dexter in or send him away or try to fix him through therapy and prayer or whatever else a normal person might attempt, Harry taught him a code: kill only killers. Never get caught, leave no evidence, be absolutely certain. That code is the spine of the entire show. It's the thing Dexter filters every single decision through. Across every season, every antagonist, every complication the show throws at him. And it's the thing that when you're watching, you find yourself filtering everything through too. The other thing worth knowing before we dive in is the ritual. Because Dexter doesn't just kill people. There's a whole process. He researches the target, surveillance, evidence gathering, often leveraging his job at Miami Metro to get access to things a civilian couldn't touch. Then comes the M99, a sedative that takes someone down fast and clean. Then the kill room, a space, usually somewhere temporary, industrial, abandoned, lined floor to ceiling in plastic sheeting. Photographs of the target's victims, when there are any, arranged on the walls around the table. The target strapped down with cling wrap. And then a conversation. Usually, Dexter doesn't rush. He makes the person understand why they're there. Then the scalpel across the cheek, one small cut, a single drop of blood pressed onto a glass slide, added to a collection he keeps in a little wooden box. And then the kill itself, almost always a knife through the heart. That box of blood slides is one of my favorite details in the whole show, actually. It's such a specific, quietly macabre choice. He keeps them hidden at home like someone else might keep a box of photographs or old letters. It's the only sentimental thing about him, in a way. The only evidence that these kills leave any kind of mark on him at all, right? So we're going through the kills that hit differently. Roughly chronological, though I'll drift around a bit when the mood calls for it. Some of these are season finales, some are mid-season moments, some are barely 10 minutes of screen time and yet somehow perfectly constructed. We'll go through what happened, who the target was, what made it satisfying, and a bit about why it worked the way it worked. One thing I want to mention before we get going, because it's relevant to all of it. Dexter premiered in 2006 at a particular moment in television history when the anti-hero drama was becoming the dominant prestige format. Tony Soprano had already run for 6 seasons. The Sopranos proved that audiences would follow a genuinely bad man across years of television if the writing was good enough and the interiority was rich enough. Dexter arrived in that context and did something slightly different. Where Tony was a bad man doing bad things and occasionally regretting them, Dexter is a bad man doing bad things to other bad men and presenting that as almost tidy. The moral arithmetic is simpler on the surface, and that simplicity is part of what made the show so watchable, in the same way that a very straightforward story told well is often more compelling than a complicated story told with effort. The show ran for 8 seasons on Showtime between 2006 and 2013, with a revival in New Blood in 2021 and then further continuation through Original Sin and Resurrection. That's a long time to spend with one character's interior monologue, and the remarkable thing is that the character remains coherent across all of it. Not unchanged, not static, but coherent. Dexter Morgan at the beginning and Dexter Morgan in Iron Lake are recognizably the same person, with the same voice, the same dry observations, the same way of processing the world through a forensic lens. The framework changed around him. The code was tested and bent. The people in his life came and went and paid various prices for being close to him, but the voice stayed. That's a significant achievement for a long-running television drama, and I don't think it gets enough credit. The show had writer's room turnover, had showrunner changes, had a finale that divided its audience dramatically, had a revival that tried to retroactively correct some of that. Through all of it, Dexter as a character held together. Michael C. Hall's performance is the anchor, and it's steady across 15+ years of television. The way he delivers internal monologue that is simultaneously clinical and occasionally warm, matter-of-fact and occasionally wry, that register is very hard to maintain, and he maintains it completely. I don't know, I find it impressive. If you like this sort of thing, a subscribe would be really appreciated. There's plenty more of this kind of content coming, including other Dexter deep dives, the mythology of the show, the dark passenger, the season villains. Lots to get into. Right, enough preamble, let's get into the kills. Before we get into specific kills, I want to spend a little time just in the ritual itself, not the drama of it, not the chase or the investigation, just the room, the process. Because a big part of why the kills in Dexter work, why they feel the way they feel, is entirely down to what Dexter does before and after the knife, not just during it. The kill room is always temporary, that's the first thing. It's never somewhere permanent, never somewhere with any connection to Dexter's actual life. It's a rented space, an abandoned building, a shipping container, a hotel room he's pre-lined with plastic. The plastic itself is almost its own character. The sound of it, the way it reflects the light, the way it transforms whatever grimy industrial space he's working in into something that looks almost clinical, almost surgical. He spends real time setting it up, which I always found oddly interesting. You'd think someone like Dexter would be efficient about it in a purely functional way, but there's care there. The photographs arranged on the wall aren't strictly necessary for the kill. They're there because Dexter wants the person to see them. That's actually a significant thing about the ritual that the show doesn't always spell out explicitly. The photographs of the victims, the people the target has hurt or killed, aren't evidence in the legal sense. Dexter's already past that point by the time he's setting up the room. They're there as a kind of indictment, a last confrontation between what the person has done and the reality of it before everything ends. Some targets look at the photographs and break immediately. Some get angry, some try to negotiate. Dexter watches all of it with that same calm, slightly detached interest he brings to everything. The M99 comes earlier, obviously, long before the room is set up. Dexter tracks the target, finds a moment where they're isolated and he can get close, and injects them before they have any real chance to respond. There's something almost peaceful about the M99 knockdown scenes, actually. The person just sort of subsides, like they've gone to sleep, which I suppose from a certain angle is what's happening. They just don't wake up in a context they'd have chosen. Then the cling wrap. This is another specific visual that the show uses consistently enough that it becomes almost comforting in itself, which is a strange thing to say. But it's true. Once you know the show, once you've watched enough of it, the cling wrap going on means everything is going according to plan. It means Dexter is in control. It means whatever threat this person represented is about to be resolved. There's genuine comfort in that if you're the kind of viewer who has spent 12 episodes despising the person on the table. The conversation that follows is always the most variable part. Early in the show, in seasons 1 and 2, Dexter keeps these relatively short, almost transactional. Here's what you did. Here is why this is happening. Here is the knife. As the show progresses and Dexter's psychology gets more complicated, the conversations get longer and stranger. He starts engaging more, arguing sometimes. In a few cases, he listens to the person on the table more than he probably should. The code never changes, but his relationship to executing it does. And then the blood slide, a scalpel across the cheek, one drop pressed onto glass and stored in that little wooden box he keeps wherever he's living. Over the years, the box fills slowly. It's never fully shown how many slides are in there, but the implication is that it's been filling since he was in his early 30s. That's a long time. A lot of slides, and yet he keeps the box hidden and never seems tempted to look at it the way you might expect. Not nostalgically, not as a trophy in the conventional sense. It's more like a record, like he's keeping accounts. I've always thought the blood slides say something interesting about Dexter's relationship with memory. He doesn't remember kills the way other people remember important moments. He doesn't replay them. The slide is a small physical anchor to something that, for him, just sort of passed. The way other people might keep a ticket stub from a film they liked just to confirm it happened. No notes. That's a profoundly odd way to be, and also somehow completely legible. The dismemberment and disposal is the last part, and the show handles it mostly matter-of-factly. Garbage bags, usually. Sometimes the boat, Dexter's boat, the slice of life, which he takes out into open water often enough that it becomes its own kind of running detail. He operates methodically, efficiently, the way you'd expect a forensic analyst to operate. No mess left behind, no trace. And then he goes home, usually, and makes breakfast or does laundry or something aggressively normal, which is the other great running joke the show never quite stops doing all the way through. There's also a question of targets and how Dexter identifies them that I think is worth spending a moment on before we get into the specific kills. The code requires that Dexter be certain. Not legally certain in the way a court would require, but personally certain. He's done enough surveillance, gathered enough evidence, confirmed enough that the person on his list has definitely done what he believes they've done. He leverages his job at Miami Metro extensively for this. Being a bloodspatter analyst gives him access to crime scenes, evidence logs, witness reports, forensic databases, and the investigative knowledge of the entire homicide department. He's essentially a private detective with full police access and no oversight, which is a deeply unfair advantage. The irony of Dexter's position is one the show returns to often. He catches killers better than the police do because he thinks like them, because he understands what they've left behind at a scene in a way that a more conventional investigator can't. He identifies suspects the department hasn't connected yet. He develops profiles from physical evidence that are accurate in ways that impress his colleagues. The job and the life are mutually reinforcing in a way that is either perfectly designed by Harry or a magnificent coincidence, depending on your view of Harry's long-term planning. Harry's planning was considerable, as it turns out. One of the things Original Sin and the prequel series adds to the mythology is a clearer picture of how deliberately Harry shaped Dexter's path. He pushed Dexter toward forensics. He cultivated the interest, provided the resources, made introductions. The bloodspatter specialization specifically was Harry's guidance, which has either inspired tactical thinking or deeply unsettling parenting, and is probably both. Harry was a complicated man. We'll get to some of that in other videos. One other thing worth mentioning, because it comes up repeatedly across the series, is what the killings actually feel like to Dexter internally. He describes it as release, as the only real emotional experience he has access to in an otherwise somewhat flattened emotional landscape. He uses the phrase dark passenger to describe the compulsion, the thing that drives the need to kill, the pressure that builds if he goes without, the animal restlessness he carries around under the forensic analyst exterior. It's a term he uses for himself, and Harry never adopts it, so it never becomes a kind of shared language between them for something neither of them fully understands. The dark passenger framing is interesting because it creates a slight distance between Dexter and his own actions. It's always been a question whether the dark passenger is genuinely a separate drive, a kind of dissociative way of relating to his own nature, or just a useful narrative device for explaining his psychology to himself. The show never resolves that definitively, which is probably the right call, It's the kind of question that's more productive left open, right? So that's the room, the process, the ritual. With that in mind, let's get into the specific kills, starting, as everything has to start, at the very beginning. Actually, one more thing before we do, because it's relevant, and I find it genuinely interesting. The ritual in Season 1 and the ritual in Season 7 are not quite the same thing, even though the mechanics are identical. Early Dexter is clinical about it in a way that has almost no emotional texture at all. He researches, he prepares, he executes, he disposes. There's efficiency and care, but there isn't weight. The kills are almost administrative. As the seasons go on and Dexter's life gets more complicated, as he accumulates relationships, responsibilities, a family, Deborah's knowledge, the Bay Harbor butcher investigation, all of it, the kills start carrying more. The kill room conversations get longer and stranger. He starts listening differently. He brings personal things into the room. Miguel's garrote instead of a knife. Arthur's model trains arranged on the floor. The blood slide box that he burns. The ritual stays the same on the surface and changes underneath, shaped by who Dexter is becoming. That evolution is one of the things that keeps the show interesting from season to season. You're watching a person develop in the only register available to them. Dexter can't develop emotionally in the ways most television characters do. He doesn't fall in love in the conventional sense, doesn't grieve in the conventional sense, doesn't grow in the ways a hero's journey usually requires. But he does change. His relationship to the kills changes. His relationship to the people around the kills changes. And the ritual, the plastic and the scalpel and the blood slide, is the constant through which all of that change becomes visible if you're watching carefully enough. The first season of Dexter is, in a lot of ways, a story about identity. Not the obvious kind, not who is Dexter Morgan, serial killer, but the quieter and more uncomfortable question of who he is without Harry's framework around him. Harry built the code because he could see what Dexter was becoming and decided to shape it rather than stop it. The whole first season is Dexter operating within that structure, reasonably confidently, while something in the margins keeps tugging at him, leaving him messages, showing him what he could look like if he let go of the rules entirely. That something is the ice truck killer. The ice truck killer's victims turn up exsanguinated, completely drained of blood, and arranged in precise, almost artistic poses. No blood at all, not a drop, which, as a method of communication directed specifically at Dexter Morgan, the blood spatter analyst who needs a single drop from every kill to feel complete, is genuinely clever. It's taunting, but it's also intimate. The ICK, as Miami Metro calls him, clearly knows Dexter, knows what he is. And whoever this is, they want Dexter to see something of himself in the work. The identity of the ice truck killer is one of those reveals that lands harder the first time you watch it than on any subsequent rewatch, because on the rewatch, all the hints are so obvious it almost seems impossible to have missed them. His name is Brian Moiser. He's been going by Rudy Cooper. He's Deborah's boyfriend, and he's Dexter's biological brother, the older of the two boys who were present in that shipping container when their mother, Laura Moiser, was murdered in front of them by a drug cartel with chainsaws. Both boys sat in several inches of their mother's blood for 2 days before they were found. Harry took Dexter. Brian, slightly older and slightly more damaged by the experience, ended up in the system. The trauma calcified differently in each of them. Brian turned into something unmediated. No Harry, no code, no structure around whatever the shipping container had made him. Just the killing itself and an obsession with finding his brother. The emotional weight of this is significant, and the show doesn't underplay it. Dexter, who has spent his whole life being told by Harry that he's something fundamentally alone, that no one could ever really know him, that he would always be other, suddenly has a blood relative who is exactly what he is. More than that, Brian has sought him out. Brian knows him. Brian is offering him something Harry never did, which is company in the thing itself. "We're the same," Brian tells him. And the horrible thing is that he's not wrong. What Dexter has to confront in the season 1 finale is that being understood by someone doesn't make them safe. Brian had kidnapped Deborah and arranged her in an elaborate tableau, a kill room in their childhood home that mirrored Dexter's own ritual, with Deborah as a kind of offering or invitation. A suggestion that Dexter let go of his adoptive family and come toward something more honest. And for a moment, actually more than a moment, Dexter has to genuinely decide. He cuts Deborah free, he finds Brian, and he kills him. The kill itself is quiet and precise. Brian isn't on a table, wrapped in plastic. That would have been too formal, too much like any other kill. Dexter finds him and cuts his throat, and then stages it as a suicide, making it look like the ice truck killer took his own life when the walls closed in. It's staged with the same forensic care Dexter brings to everything, but there's something in the execution, in the choice to stage it as a suicide rather than simply disposing of the body. That feels like it's partly for Dexter himself, a story he can tell, a version of events that closes a door rather than leaving it open. What makes this kill satisfying is almost the opposite of what makes most of the other kills on this list satisfying. With most targets, the satisfaction is moral. They did terrible things, and now they've received a consequence that the legal system couldn't or wouldn't deliver. With Brian, the satisfaction is almost entirely emotional, and it's laced with sadness. Brian was a monster, yes. He killed women. He terrorized Miami. He kidnapped Deborah. None of that is minor. But he was also the only person who had ever looked at Dexter and recognized him entirely. And Dexter killed him anyway because the alternative was losing something Harry had given him that he wasn't willing to let go of. There's a line Dexter delivers internally after it's done. Something about how he wanted to feel sad or thought he should feel sad, but mostly felt something quieter than that. Which is very Dexter and also very true. He visits Brian's body one more time before the police find it, just standing there. It's one of the few moments in the whole run where you see him genuinely at a loss. The staging of the death as a suicide is the detail I find most interesting about the Baryun Moiser kill. Dexter didn't have to do that. He could have disposed of the body the way he disposes of everyone else. The boat, the bags, the ocean. Brian had no family beyond Dexter. There was no one who would mourn him or look for him in any meaningful way. The staging wasn't protective necessity in the usual sense. It was something else. A story that lets Brian be something other than what he was, in the official record. The ice truck killer didn't win, but he also didn't end up as just another victim in Dexter's ocean grave. He got a narrative. Dexter gave him one. That's a small gesture, and the show doesn't draw attention to it, which is why it lands. The season 1 finale as a whole is tighter than a lot of what came after. The ice truck killer arc has a clarity and a focus that later seasons occasionally strained for. The whole season was building to a choice, and the choice was the right one, and the kill that enacted it was exactly what it needed to be. No excess, no second guessing. The shipping container backstory is one of the more quietly horrifying pieces of Dexter mythology, and Original Sin gives it additional texture that the original series only gestured at. Laura Moiser was a police informant working for Harry, feeding information to Miami Homicide about a drug cartel. She was found out, and what happened to her in that container is the foundational event the whole franchise is built on. 2 small boys, both too young to understand what was happening, both left in the aftermath for days. Harry found Dexter first. Brian went into the care system, eventually into a psychiatric facility, and was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder at an age when most children are still working out their times tables. The show makes a point, across multiple seasons, through Brian's hallucinated appearances and Dexter's reflections, that the difference between them isn't nature, it's Harry. Brian had the same starting material and the same trauma, and no framework around it, no careful hand shaping what he was becoming. What he became was unmediated, raw, and brilliant in a terrible way. The ice truck killer's work is sophisticated, the messages to Dexter are intelligent and specific. The sustained parallel identity as Rudy Cooper is an impressive long con. Brian was capable of everything Dexter was capable of, just without the code to aim it. That's the thing that makes the kill so affecting. Dexter isn't killing someone who is fundamentally unlike him. He's killing the clearest possible version of what he would have been without Harry. And there's grief in that, even though Dexter doesn't fully process it as grief at the time. The show is smart enough to let that sit without resolving it into something neater. Brian keeps turning up in visions and hallucinations in later seasons, particularly when Dexter's at low points, which makes a certain psychological sense. Of all the people on all those blood slides, Brian is the one that left something behind. Season 2 is the Bay Harbor Butcher season, Divers pull 36 garbage bags from the ocean floor off Miami, and the contents of those bags, dismembered remains of people who had previously vanished without explanation, kick off a federal investigation that runs for the whole season. The FBI assigns Special Agent Frank Lundy to lead it, and Lundy is exactly the kind of brilliant, patient, methodical investigator that you'd least want on your trail if you were Dexter Morgan. Alongside Lundy, Sergeant Dokes, who has always on some primal instinct known something was wrong with Dexter, becomes increasingly fixated. It's a lot of pressure, and Dexter handles it the way Dexter handles most pressure, which is by making things significantly worse for himself. He starts attending Narcotics Anonymous meetings as cover, using addiction as a metaphor for the killing compulsion. This is actually a reasonably clever idea. The problem is that he meets Lila there. Lila West is fascinating in a genuinely unsettling way. She's British, she's striking, she's an artist who lives in a vast warehouse flat that looks like something between a film set and a crime scene. And she latches onto Dexter with an intensity that starts as intriguing and curdles quickly into something else entirely. She presents herself as deeply understanding of his addiction. And in a way she is, not because she's intuited what he actually is, but because she has her own darkness, and she's drawn to his without fully understanding the shape of it. She performs understanding better than she experiences it. Dexter gets drawn in, which is part of what makes Season 2 occasionally frustrating to rewatch. He knows better, and he does it anyway, because Lila is offering him something that Rita, warm, patient, good-hearted Rita, cannot. She's offering him a mirror, or what she presents as a mirror. The problem with Lila is that the mirror is warped. She doesn't actually see Dexter. She sees a version of him that confirms things she wants to believe about herself. Things deteriorate steadily. Lila discovers what Dexter is, not the full extent, but enough. Rather than being horrified, she finds it fascinating, which should have been a clearer warning sign than Dexter treated it as. She starts involving herself in things she has no business involving herself in. She sets fire to her own apartment and lets Dexter think he caused it. She manipulates him away from Rita. She tracks Dexter to the cabin in the Everglades where he's keeping Dokes locked in a cage, Dokes having finally caught him in the act. And she is the one who blows up the cabin, killing Dokes, because she's decided this is how she helps Dexter. Dokes had been framed as the Bay Harbor butcher before this point, but Lila doesn't even know that's the plan. She just acts. And then, because Lila is Lila and she doesn't know when to stop, she tries to kill Astor, Cody, and baby Harrison in a gas explosion when Dexter tries to end things with her. When Dexter tracks her to Paris, where she's fled, apparently operating on the assumption that a new city makes her untouchable. It's one of the most low-key, efficient kills in the show's entire run. He finds her apartment. He finds her. She sees him. And there's a moment where you can almost see her trying to process whether this is Dexter who cares about her or Dexter who's here for a different reason. She gets the answer quickly. What I find satisfying about the Lila kill is exactly its quietness. It's not dramatic. There's no big confrontation, no elaborate setup, no kill room. She doesn't get a speech. After 8 or 9 episodes of Lila being maximally chaotic and getting away with things that should have ended her much earlier, the simplicity of how it ends feels like a correction. Not revenge, not justice in any legal sense, just a problem resolved cleanly in another country where it won't complicate anyone's life. The Season 2 structure is worth a paragraph on its own because it's doing something slightly different from the other seasons. Season 1 was about identity and the ice truck killer's challenge to Dexter's constructed self. Season 2 is about exposure. The Bay Harbor. Butcher Investigation is the first time the show fully commits to the premise of Dexter being genuinely at risk from his own side, from the police department he works in. Lundy is a credible investigator who gets closer to the truth than most people in the original series. Dokes, who has always operated on instinct where Dexter is concerned, finally has institutional machinery behind his suspicion. Season 2 is, in many ways, the show at its most tightly plotted. Lila complicates that in a useful way. She's not part of the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation. She's an intrusion from a different direction. A complication Dexter created for himself by getting involved with someone he shouldn't have, driven by the loneliness of having a secret no one in his actual life can know. Dexter and Lila work for a while because she asks questions that other people in his life don't ask. She doesn't flinch from darkness. He mistakes this for the kind of understanding he actually needs, and the show traces the mistake carefully. What's particularly interesting about Lila in retrospect is that she never fully grasps the code. She understands that Dexter kills and she finds it fascinating, but she doesn't understand the discipline underneath it. For Lila, the killing is the interesting part. For Dexter, the code is the interesting part. The killing is the outlet, but the code is the architecture. She would have been just as excited if Dexter killed randomly, maybe more so. That's the fundamental incompatibility between them, and it takes the entire season to play out. The fact that it happens in Paris is also somehow perfect. Lila had this whole romantic self-mythology about herself as an artist, as someone dramatic and extraordinary and European in sensibility even when she was in Miami. She got to be in Paris, she just didn't get to enjoy it. There's also something worth noting about Season 2's structure, which is that the actual big bad of the season, the existential threat to Dexter, isn't Lila at all. It's Dokes, and then it's the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation. Lila is a complication that spiraled. The fact that she ends up causing the resolution of the Dokes problem and then has to be dealt with as a consequence is almost farcical in structure, and the show leans into that slightly. The Paris kill is the season tying off its own loose thread and doing it with the kind of purposeful neatness that the rest of the season spent a lot of time lacking. Dokes' death is worth a note here because it's one of the stranger moral situations the show creates. Dokes is in that cabin because he's right. He's been right about Dexter from the beginning, operating on instinct, and the season validates every piece of that instinct. He found Dexter, he had him. And then Lila blew up the cabin, framing Dokes as the Bay Harbor Butcher and killing him in the process. And Dexter's problem dissolved. He didn't kill Dokes, he didn't have to. Circumstances arranged themselves. Eric King plays Dokes as a man who is difficult and intense and occasionally excessive, but who is also fundamentally a good detective doing his job. His death is unjust in a way the show acknowledges without dwelling on. Dexter was going to have to kill him probably. The fact that he didn't have to is less morally clean than if he had. It leaves a man who is doing nothing wrong dead and framed for crimes he didn't commit, and Dexter carries that, adds it to the account he keeps internally. The Dokes resolution is the one part of Season 2 that doesn't feel satisfying in any sense. It's just a cost that got paid by someone who didn't deserve to pay it. The Paris kill, by contrast, feels earned. Lila made her own choices, and they ended where they ended. That's a distinction the show understands. There's also something in the geography of the Lila kill that feels right in a way that's hard to articulate. Miami was always Lila's stage. She performed constantly there. Everything about her was maximally theatrical. She wore the city like a costume. Paris was where she thought she could start again, reinvent herself, leave the chaos behind. What she didn't account for was that chaos tends to follow people who generate it. Dexter finding her there in the city she'd escaped to is the show closing an irony as neatly as any of its better structural moments. She didn't run far enough because there isn't far enough, and Dexter, who can track a blood spatter across a crime scene from 3 weeks prior, can certainly track a person across a continent. The Paris kill remains one of the most underrated moments in the series, and I'd put it in the top half of this list comfortably. Low-key, efficient, correct. Everything about it is exactly what it needed to be, and nothing more. Season 3 is probably the most underrated season of the show, and I'll defend that mildly. It doesn't have the raw, propulsive energy of Season 4. It doesn't have the clean, conceptual premise of Season 1, but it does something genuinely interesting that the show never quite tried again. It gives Dexter a willing partner and then watches what happens. The setup starts with an accident. Dexter is about to kill a drug dealer named Fribo when Fribo's attacker, Oscar Prado, interrupts unexpectedly, and Dexter kills Oscar in self-defense while Fribo escapes. Oscar's brother is Miguel Prado, the city's assistant district attorney, a charismatic and politically ambitious man who is also quietly devastated by his brother's death. Miguel and Dexter are already vaguely acquainted through work, and in the aftermath of Oscar's death, they become closer. And then, in pieces, through a combination of his own investigative instincts and Dexter being less careful than he should be, Miguel figures out what Dexter is. Here's where it gets interesting. Miguel doesn't go to the police. He doesn't recoil in horror. He asks to be part of it. The friendship that develops between Miguel and Dexter across the middle of season 3 is genuinely compelling television. And a lot of that is Jimmy Smits's performance, which is warm and smart and just subtly wrong in ways you feel before you can articulate them. Miguel presents himself as a kindred spirit, someone who has spent years watching guilty people walk free because of legal technicalities, because of money, because the system isn't built to deliver the kind of justice he believes in. He sees the code as something like moral philosophy. He tells Dexter that killing Billy Fleeter makes him feel fantastic. The thing is, Miguel means it, at least at first. What erodes it is that Miguel doesn't have Dexter's discipline and he doesn't have Harry's framework. He has ambition and intelligence and genuine belief in his own righteousness. And when those things are applied without constraint, they move quickly from vigilantism into something more like personal convenience. Miguel kills a rival. He lies to Dexter about who he's targeting and why. He starts using the code as cover for things the code was explicitly designed to prevent, eliminating people who are simply in his way. And then, when Dexter confronts him about it, Miguel says something that's almost a thesis statement for the whole season. He calls the code a straitjacket. He asks how many people Dexter has killed. And when Dexter doesn't answer, Miguel asks why Dexter gets to decide. It's a genuinely good question, actually. The show's aware enough to present it properly without just having Miguel be obviously wrong. But it's also the moment you understand completely that Miguel can't be saved or corrected because he's not operating in bad faith. He actually believes what he's saying, and what he believes is that rules only matter when they serve you. The friendship between Miguel and Dexter in the earlier part of season 3 is genuinely affecting in ways that make the deterioration hurt more than it would otherwise. They spend time together. They go to a baseball game. They have the kind of easy, joking, mutual respect dynamic that Dexter is almost never allowed to have with anyone, because anyone who knows him well enough is either in on the secret and horrified, or completely unaware and therefore held at arm's length. Miguel is in on it and excited about it, and for a while that feels like companionship. Jimmy Smits plays the warmth of it so well that the turn reads as a genuine betrayal rather than an inevitable one, even if you can see it coming. The garrote is the detail I keep returning to with Miguel's kill. Dexter uses a garrote, a wire, rather than the knife. He doesn't explain why, but the choice feels deliberate in a way the show doesn't need to spell out. A knife is clinical. The garrote is personal. It's the kill method of someone who is angry in a way they don't fully acknowledge. Miguel was Dexter's best approximation of a friend, and he used that approximation to hurt people Dexter cared about, and to try to take something that wasn't his. The garrote says something about what that cost. The season also frames the whole thing with the background of the Skinner, another serial killer working Miami that season, George King, who eventually gets dealt with in a different way entirely. The Skinner is there partly as misdirection, partly as contrast. George King is a monster in a relatively uncomplicated sense. Miguel is complicated, charming, intelligent, operating with a kind of twisted sincerity right up until the end. The difference between them is almost the point. The code isn't designed for the obviously monstrous. It's designed for the kind of person who can talk you into believing they're something else. Season 3 doesn't get mentioned much in the best seasons conversations about Dexter, and I think that's partly because Season 4 is so good that it overshadows everything adjacent to it. But Season 3 is doing something genuine. It's testing the code from the inside rather than from the outside. Not asking whether Dexter will get caught, but asking whether the framework itself is defensible. Miguel's argument isn't stupid. He's not wrong that Dexter makes unilateral decisions about who deserves to die based on his own evidence gathering and his own moral evaluation. He's not wrong that this is a power Dexter has awarded himself. The code's answer to this is essentially, yes, but I have better judgment and stricter criteria. Which is true of Dexter and Harry's version, and completely not true of what Miguel was doing with it. The same framework, differently administered, produces radically different results. That's the point Season 3 is making, and the Miguel kill is how it finishes the argument. There's also a moment after the kill, brief, understated, where Dexter arranges for Miguel's murder to be attributed to the Skinner, who was leaving bodies in Miami at the time. The framing is competent and it works. but it means Miguel Prado, the assistant district attorney, the beloved civic figure, dies with the official narrative of his death being something completely false. No one knows the real story except Dexter. That's the particular loneliness of every kill like this. The story that gets told about these people is always incomplete, and Dexter is the only one who holds the real version. He carries that alone, as he carries everything else. There is a version of this list where Arthur Mitchell's kill would be at the top, and I'd understand that argument completely. Season 4 is broadly considered the best season of Dexter, and the Tranquillity killer is broadly considered the best antagonist. John Lithgow's performance is one of the great villain turns in television drama. Not because Arthur is outwardly frightening in the way villains often are, but because he's so uncanny. There's something wrong with him in a way that registers before you can explain it. He's too still, too controlled, too plausible. Arthur Mitchell is a church volunteer, a community figure, a family man with a wife and 2 children in a pleasant suburban home. He's organized church-building projects for the homeless through his foundation, 4 Walls, 1 Heart. He's been doing this for years, decades in fact. And in parallel with all of this, he has been committing murders in a precise, repeating cycle for 30 years without being caught. The Tranquillity killer's pattern, as Miami Metro slowly, agonizingly pieces together, involves 4 killings in a specific sequence. The details of the cycle and what they represent psychologically are something the show unpacks gradually, and I won't go through the whole of it here. But the important thing is that it's been running since the 1970s and the FBI never connected it. 30-odd years of murders across multiple cities, and Arthur Mitchell came home to his family each time. Dexter finds Arthur before Miami Metro does. He identifies him, makes contact, and has a moment, maybe a few episodes worth of moments, where he genuinely considers not killing him immediately. Because what Dexter sees in Arthur initially is something he wants to understand. Arthur has a family, a life that looks normal from the outside, and Dexter, newly married to Rita, with a baby on the way and stepchildren in the house, is desperately trying to figure out if what Arthur appears to have is something he could actually have too. Can you be a killer and have a family? Arthur seems like evidence that the answer is yes. The answer is emphatically no, but Dexter takes too long to arrive there. The way the show builds the Dexter-Arthur dynamic across season 4 is one of the more subtle things it does. They interact repeatedly under various covers. Dexter even helps Arthur with a charitable project at one point, gives his actual labor to Arthur's church volunteer work. And there's something almost absurdist about it, this particular pair of men working side by side. Arthur doesn't know what Dexter is initially. He thinks he's made a somewhat irritating friend he can't quite shake. Dexter thinks he's studying a man who has something to teach him about sustaining a double life. Neither of them is seeing the other clearly. What gradually becomes apparent, both to Dexter and to the audience, is that Arthur's family life is not the functional miracle it appears from the outside. His wife and children live in low-grade terror of him. He controls and humiliates them in the specific, quiet ways of a man who has never had to be anything other than what he is at home. The church volunteer and the kind community figure are performance. The man his family actually lives with is different. Dexter, watching this unfold, is watching the lesson. He came for dissolve entirely. There is no version of Arthur Mitchell's life that could be usefully adapted. It's lies all the way down. This is the core tragedy of season 4. Dexter keeps pulling back. He has Arthur in his grasp more than once and delays because he's still observing, still studying, still asking whether there's something useful to learn. And in that delay, Arthur keeps killing. The 4th kill in Arthur's cycle, the one Miami Metro discovers late in the season, the one that adds a whole new dimension of horror to his pattern, is a child, has always been a child. Dexter didn't know that. By the time Dexter finally acts, Arthur has killed Rita. That sentence is worth sitting with. The finale of season 4, The Getaway, opens with Dexter finding Rita dead in the bathtub of their home, murdered by Arthur in the same method that defines the beginning of his cycle, with baby Harrison sitting in her blood. It's the most devastating scene in the entire series, and it directly results from Dexter's hesitation. He let Arthur live too long. He kept choosing to observe rather than act. And Rita, who was kind and loving and entirely separate from all of this, paid for it. He kills Arthur in the same episode. The capture is almost casual in its execution. Dexter has tracked Arthur to his black repainted Mustang on a deserted road, slams the hood down on him from behind, holds up the missing oil cap and says simply, "Hello, Arthur Mitchell." There's no urgency in his voice, no anger, quite, just finality. The kill room conversation with Arthur is one of the longer and stranger ones in the series. Arthur tries to claim that God led Dexter to him, that this was meant to be, that both of them were following a path. He criticizes Dexter for taking pleasure in killing, which is a remarkable thing to say from inside a roll of cling wrap. He tells Dexter he was following his own path. Dexter listens mostly, lets Arthur finish, then tells him he destroyed his family and slices his cheek. What I think about most with this kill is the timing. The show is structured such that you understand, watching the finale, that Dexter killing Arthur is completely correct and completely too late. There's no relief in it. He deserved to die 6 episodes earlier. He deserved to die arguably before the season started. But the satisfaction, and it's there underneath everything else, is at least a resolution. Arthur Mitchell, who had been killing people in his specific, ritualistic way for 30 years, is finally done. The cycle ends on that table. The model train set that Dexter places around the kill room, Arthur had a whole elaborate model railway he'd built in his basement. Another piece of the uncanny domesticity of him, is the kind of detail the show does well. It's specific. It says something about the kill being personal, not just procedural. There's also something worth sitting with in Arthur's claim that God led Dexter to him. Arthur believed it. He was a religious man, genuinely, not performatively, and he had built an entire theology around what he was. His church work was real. His family was real, in the sense that he had one, and they were people, even though he treated them with a particular kind of sustained cruelty that the show unflinches at showing. He sang hymns, he led prayer groups, and he killed in a cycle that he had clearly, over 30 years, found a way to integrate into his sense of himself as a righteous person. That integration is the most disturbing thing about Arthur Mitchell, not the killing, not the family he kept, the fact that he managed to hold all of it together as a coherent self without visible fracture for decades. He didn't become the Trinity killer at the expense of Arthur Mitchell. Arthur Mitchell and the Trinity killer were the same person and saw no contradiction. John Lithgow's performance makes this completely believable, which is a considerable achievement. The kill room conversation runs long because Dexter is doing something he doesn't usually do. He's listening to Arthur claim that their meeting was divine. And there's a part of Dexter, the part that spent 4 seasons looking for any evidence that a person like him could have a life, a family, something that looked like normal, that has to reckon with the fact that Arthur had that, and it was built on lies and violence and the suffering of his own children. The thing Dexter wanted to learn from Arthur turns out to be the wrong lesson entirely. The other thing the Trinity kill does is reset the show entirely. Everything after season 4 is a different program in a sense because Rita is gone and the consequences of Dexter's choices have become undeniable. She's the cost of the secret life. The show never lets that go completely, even in its less successful later seasons. The Trinity kill is the best kill in the show and also the one that costs the most. Season 5 is the season the show made after it had to figure out how to continue existing. Rita's murder at the end of season 4 is a structural rupture. The emotional ground the show had been building for 4 years collapsed, and the question season 5 has to answer is, what comes after something that devastating? The answer the writers arrived at is both reasonable and, in retrospect, one of the more interesting things the show ever did. They gave Dexter a partner, not the kind of partner Miguel Prado was, not someone trying to participate in the killing, not someone who found the dark side of Dexter exciting or validating. Lumen Pierce, played by Julia Stiles, is a survivor. She was abducted by a group of men, wealthy, influential, organized, who had been kidnapping and assaulting women for years. Dexter finds her during a kill, initially planning to eliminate her as a witness, and then doesn't. Something stops him. It's one of the few times in the series Dexter breaks his own pattern, and the show makes the break feel completely believable rather than contrived. Season 5 opens with Dexter in a particular kind of shock that the show renders honestly and without sentimentality. He doesn't fall apart in the conventional grief sense. He functions. He does the job. He takes care of Harrison. He moves through the routines. but there's something absent that wasn't absent before, and the show lets you see it in the margins. The flat affect is flatter, the voiceover is quieter, the mechanical competence he brings to everything is more mechanical than usual. He attends a grief support group at one point and says something entirely wrong in completely good faith because he genuinely cannot calibrate what the other people in the room are feeling. He knows he should be feeling something and he's not sure what shape it's meant to take. Lumen's arrival into this specific version of Dexter is what makes the dynamic work. She isn't asking him to feel anything. She isn't asking him to be something he isn't. She needs something specific and brutal, and Dexter is precisely equipped to provide it. And in doing that, in having someone who needs what he can actually offer, something in him that had gone quiet comes back. It's not romance initially, it's utility becoming something more. And the show builds it slowly enough that when it becomes something more, it feels earned rather than contrived. Lumen wants the men who hurt her dead. She's not asking for justice through the legal system, partly because she doesn't believe it would work, and partly because the group includes people with enough money and connection to make prosecution genuinely complicated. She wants them gone from the world entirely, and she wants to be part of making that happen. What follows across Season 5 is something slightly different in texture from the kills we've already talked about. The kills Dexter and Lumen carry out together aren't clinical. They're not ritualized in the same way. There are moments of panic, near misses, improvisation. They're doing something that feels more raw, more urgent. Not because Lumen doesn't have Dexter's capability, she develops it visibly and impressively, but because for her, these are deeply personal in a way that goes beyond the code's abstract moral logic. She knew these men. She survived them. Every kill is direct confrontation with something that happened to her specifically. The group is headed by Jordan Chase, a self-help motivational speaker with a well-funded public profile and a genuine talent for psychological manipulation. Chase is the architect, the one who organized everything, the one who created the group dynamic that enabled everything. The others are followers of a kind, dragged into his orbit and then complicit. Chase himself is calm and clever and exactly the kind of person who knows exactly how to read the room and use it, which makes him unsettling to watch in a slightly different way from most of Dexter's targets. He doesn't panic easily, he adapts. The kill room for Jordan Chase is emotionally the centerpiece of the season's resolution, and the thing that makes it land is almost entirely Lumen's involvement. She's there. She participated in the capture, she's in the room, and Dexter, who has never in his life offered anyone else the blade, steps back and gives it to her. She makes the kill. The most satisfying kills in some ways are not Dexter's at all. They're the ones that belong to someone who needed them in a way he doesn't. And this is the clearest example of that. Deborah comes very close to discovering them during the sequence, which adds a layer of tension to the finale. She investigates the vigilante killings all season without knowing who's responsible, gets within meters of Dexter and Lumen as they finish, and sees enough to almost know before she decides not to press it. She gives the unknown vigilantes, not knowing who they are, a kind of unofficial pass. She's a good cop who can also recognize when the people who are gone deserve to be gone. It's one of Deborah's best moments in the series. The aftermath of Season 5 is where the emotional sophistication shows. After Jordan Chase is dead and the group is gone, Lumen's dark passenger, the urge that had been driving her forward since her rescue, simply fades. She tells Dexter she doesn't feel it anymore. She doesn't need to kill. She was never what Dexter was. She was someone who had been put in an extreme situation and responded to it in the way available to her. With the situation resolved, she returns to something like normal life. She leaves Miami, she leaves Dexter. The kills leading up to Jordan Chase, the other men in the group, dispatched one by one as Dexter and Lumen work through the list, are paced across the season in a way that gives each one space to land. Each one is slightly different in circumstances, slightly different in how it feels, because Lumen's relationship to each target is different. Some of them she knew better than others. One of them tries to bargain. One of them is simply terrified and has nothing to offer. The emotional texture across the group is more varied than most of Dexter's seasonal kill sequences, probably because it's being filtered through someone who experiences it as grief work rather than ritual. Jordan Chase himself is particularly well observed. Self-help motivational speakers as antagonists are a specific and slightly satirical choice. All that language about unlocking your potential and living without limits, weaponized into something genuinely monstrous. Chase's books and seminars are about shedding the fear that holds you back. And what holds his followers back in the specific group he's built is conscience. He selected them carefully, organized them, and created an environment in which the thing they all were underneath the surface could operate freely. That's an interesting kind of evil, not the chainsaw-wielding terror, the architect. There's a detail the show gives Chase that I always found uncomfortable in the right way. He carries a small vial of blood on a necklace. Blood from a specific person who I won't name in case anyone wants to watch the season cold. He's been carrying it for years. He's obsessed with it in a way that parallels Dexter's blood slide box. It's a trophy, a record, the physical residue of something that matters enormously to him. The parallel is intentional and slightly damning, which is quietly devastating in its own way, but also completely right. Lumen was never going to stay, and the show is smart enough not to contort her character to make her into something she wasn't. She came, she got justice, she left. Dexter's left alone again, which is probably where Dexter belongs. But something about those kills, the Jordan Chase group, all of them, carries a different emotional register because of what they meant to someone other than Dexter. That's not something the show could have done with any of the other kills on this list. Travis Marshall is, if we're being honest, not the most compelling villain in the show's run. The Doomsday Killer storyline, staging murders as elaborate tableau based on the Book of Revelation with genuinely theatrical crime scenes, is one of the more visually ambitious things Season 6 attempts, and the production value is there. But Travis himself gets a bit lost in it. His psychology is tangled up with Professor Geller, his mentor and collaborator, and the reveal that Geller has been dead the whole season and Travis has been working alone, essentially hallucinating Geller's continued presence and guidance, is a twist that the show lands reasonably well, but that doesn't entirely retroactively improve Travis as a character. Season 6 has some proper ambitions, to be fair to it. The Doomsday tableaux are genuinely unsettling when the show commits to them. There's a crime scene in a field involving grain, and one involving a man in a window, and a marina event that disrupts an entire public gathering. The scale of what Travis is attempting is larger than most of the show's previous big bads, and for a season that gets somewhat dismissed, the imagery is consistently striking. The problem is Travis himself, who is slightly too passive as a character. He's compelling in scenes with Geller, and then less compelling when the show has to reveal that Geller was a projection all along and Travis was carrying the whole thing. Colin Hanks is fine in the role, but the character as written needed slightly more architecture behind the eyes. What the season does well is Dexter's own arc. He's a single father now, raising Harrison, and the show uses that to explore questions about meaning and belief that Dexter has never had to engage with before. His son will grow up. His son will ask questions. What does Dexter believe, if anything, and how does he intend to raise a child when the honest answer to most philosophical questions is, I don't know, I mostly experience the world as something to move through rather than something to find meaning in. Season 6 is Dexter wrestling with that, however imperfectly. By the time Dexter catches up to Travis at the start of the Season 6 finale, Travis has done considerable damage. He staged a murder scene inside a church. He tried to orchestrate an actual apocalyptic event at a marina using a blood-based pathogen. He was, in his own sincerely held view, carrying out God's work, and he was genuinely devout about it. Not cynical, not using religion as cover, but truly convinced. There's something interesting in that as a characterization, though the show doesn't dig into it quite as much as it could. Dexter catches Travis on a boat and takes him to the church where he'd staged his most significant crime scene. An act of poetic neatness that the show likes, sending killers back to their own spaces. He wraps Travis in plastic, has the brief ritual conversation, and puts the knife in. And then he picks up his blood slide, stands back, and the door opens. Deborah walks in. She's been searching for Dexter specifically because she has something she wants to tell him, something personal, something significant, and she tracked him there. She walks into a church and finds her brother standing over a man wrapped in plastic on a church altar, holding a knife. She sees the whole thing, not a fragment of it, not something she can explain away. The whole thing. What follows is one of the most awkward post-kill sequences in the series, which is saying something. Dexter has to think very fast. He persuades Deborah to help him stage Travis's death as a suicide. There's a sword at the scene, part of Travis's own iconography, and Dexter uses it, burns the church, and then they drive to the docks and wait to be called to the crime scene they've just created. Deborah goes through it all in a kind of dissociative shock. She does what Dexter asks, mechanically, because she doesn't have enough of herself back together yet to argue. The blood slide is the thing that nearly undoes everything. Dexter drops it at the scene during the confusion, and LaGuerta finds it. That blood slide, Travis Marshall's blood on a glass slide found at the church, is the thread that LaGuerta pulls for the entirety of Season 7, driving her slowly toward the truth about the Bay Harbor Butcher and toward Dexter. It's the one time the ritual fails him completely, and it happens because Deborah walked through the door. What makes the Travis Marshall kill satisfying, then, is almost entirely contextual. The kill itself is procedurally sound, but its significance is everything that it sets in motion. The moment Deborah sees Dexter in that church is the moment the show's dynamic shifts permanently. She can't unknow it. He can't unsay what she saw. The clean, compartmentalized double life that has sustained the show for 6 seasons is over. LaGuerta as a character gets something in Season 7 that she arguably deserved earlier in the series. A proper arc, a proper antagonist function. She's not wrong to suspect what she suspects. She's a good detective following good evidence toward a correct conclusion. The fact that she's working against the audience's sympathies, investigating someone the show has spent 6 seasons making you root for, is one of the more interesting ethical complications the show ever created. You find yourself hoping she fails, even though everything she's doing is correct and justified. That's an uncomfortable place to be put, and the show puts you there without apology. The Travis Marshall kill also functions as a test of Deborah that the rest of Season 7 then examines in detail. She helped cover it up. She burned evidence. She's already, before she fully understands what she's actually done, compromised. And the season watches her trying to hold on to her professional identity and her sense of herself as someone with moral standards, while simultaneously knowing what she knows and having done what she's done. Jennifer Carpenter's performance across that season is worth a video entirely on its own. There's a version of the Travis kill that's just a competent mid-level villain getting his due, and it would be fine. But the version that actually exists is a hinge. Everything before it and everything after it are different stories, and the hinge itself is a man wrapped in plastic in a church, while Dexter's sister stands in the doorway trying to understand what she's looking at. That's memorable in a way that most kills on this list can't quite claim to be. Season 7 is where the show's architecture started to feel different, partly because of the Deborah revelation from the end of Season 6, and partly because the show was running out of seasons and starting to do the thing that long-running dramas sometimes do, which is get increasingly baroque. But Season 7 has some genuinely good material in it, and one of the things it does that Season 7 doesn't get enough credit for is the Victor Baskov sequence, which begins with one of Dexter's most unusual and most purely improvised kills. Victor Baskov is a member of the Koshka Brotherhood, a Ukrainian organized crime outfit that operates out of a strip club in Miami called the Foxhole. Victor kills a Miami Metro cop named Mike Anderson, shoots him on the side of the road after a minor traffic incident that escalates, and then flees the country, or tries to. Dexter, who arrives at the scene and immediately understands what happened, decides to handle it himself. The speed of the decision is notable. There's no extended surveillance phase, no weeks of gathering evidence, no confirmation and reconfirmation of guilt. Dexter knows what happened at the roadside. The physical evidence tells him the way all physical evidence tells him things, and he moves immediately. Victor is already at the airport. Dexter follows him through the terminal in real time, watching the departure boards, working out which gate, thinking through options as he walks. It's one of the few kill sequences in the series that happens almost entirely in motion, without any of the usual preparation. The conclusions are the same. The path to them is just faster. The airport kill has almost nothing in common with any other kill we've discussed. There's no surveillance phase beyond a few hours of tracking Victor through the terminal. There's no kill room, no plastic, no ritual conversation, no blood slide. Dexter follows Victor into the airport's baggage storage area, an industrial back-of-house space, concrete and fluorescent, surrounded by suitcases, corners him and beats him to death with a fire extinguisher. I find this one fascinating precisely because of how different it is. Every other kill on this list has the ceremony of the ritual around it, the structure that turns what Dexter does into something organized and considered. The Victor kill is just a man in an airport, a fire extinguisher, a problem solved before it can escape the country. Dexter is improvisational in a way he's rarely asked to be, and he's competent at it. Of course he is, he's Dexter, but watching him operate entirely outside his own system is a different kind of interesting. The ripple effects are enormous, which is proportional to how unusual the circumstances were. Victor's absence, his disappearance rather than a confirmed death, leads his colleague Isaac Sirko, the Brotherhood's senior figure in Miami, to investigate. Isaac is one of the more nuanced antagonists the show ever created, actually. He's controlled and intelligent and genuinely dangerous, and his motivation for hunting Dexter is grief rather than business. Victor was his partner in a personal sense, not just a professional one. And he wants the person who took him from him to die for it. The dynamic that develops between Dexter and Isaac across Season 7 is one of the reasons the season is better than it sometimes gets credit for. They end up in a genuine dialogue about who they are and what they do. Isaac is not a good man, but he's a self-aware one, and he asks Dexter questions that Dexter finds difficult to answer. There's a grudging mutual respect there that develops slowly. They end up sharing a drink in a bar at one point, each of them being tailed by people who want them dead, and the conversation they have is one of the better pieces of character writing in the later seasons. Isaac is curious about Dexter in a philosophical way. He finds the code interesting. He doesn't approve of it, particularly, but he's interested in the fact that Dexter built a framework around something that most people simply wouldn't acknowledge having. The Isaac thread ends somewhat abruptly when the Brotherhood puts out a contract on Isaac for reasons entirely separate from his vendetta with Dexter, which is a slightly frustrating resolution. But it's also, in a strange way, realistic. Institutional machinery grinds regardless of what the people inside it feel. Isaac was a senior figure in a criminal organization, and he'd become a liability. The fact that he and Dexter had developed something resembling mutual understanding is irrelevant to the people making the decision. That's cold, but not untrue. What I appreciate about the Victor kill, thinking about it in context, is that it demonstrates something the show doesn't always explicitly state. Dexter's competence doesn't require the ritual. The ritual is what he wants, what satisfies him, what gives meaning to the killing in the particular way that meaning has for him. But he doesn't need it. He can do it in an airport with whatever's at hand. That's a slightly unsettling thing to know about a character, and the show is quietly, calmly aware of what it's telling you. Now this is the one I think about most when I think about the word satisfying in the context of Dexter kills, because everything that happens in the Speltzer arc is designed to earn its ending, and it does. Walter Speltzer is a groundskeeper at a cemetery in Miami, and he is a predator of a specific and terrible kind. He selects victims, stalks them, and then turns his attacks into literal pursuits. Chases through enclosed or semi-enclosed spaces with Speltzer hunting. It's theatrical in a way that's about dominance rather than theater, about the removal of any illusion that the victim has a chance. He wore a bullhorned helmet during the attacks, which is the kind of detail that in retrospect says everything you need to know about him. He's caught, he's charged, and then he walks free because the officers who arrested him used excessive force during apprehension, beating him while he was unconscious and unresisting, which made his arrest legally compromised, and a judge dismissed the charges. He files a lawsuit against Miami Metro. He turns up at the funeral of one of his victims looking smug. Deborah, who has been across all of this as lieutenant and who saw Speltzer taunt her at the funeral, is shaking with rage and helplessness. Dexter goes for Speltzer. The first attempt goes wrong. Dexter breaks into Speltzer's RV, finds steroid supplies and earrings, trophies from his victims, and is still looking around when Speltzer comes back and catches him completely off guard. Speltzer is not small, and he is very strong, and the fight that follows is one of the few times in the series where Dexter loses badly. He gets knocked out. He wakes up in an abandoned warehouse with a note that reads, "Run." He won't run, and then Speltzer emerges in the bull-horned helmet carrying an axe, and Dexter changes his mind immediately and runs, which is the right call. He escapes. Speltzer lets him, which is the kind of theatrical cruelty that says this will not end with Dexter's first attempt. The chase sequence through the abandoned warehouse is worth sitting with for a moment because it's one of the only times in the series where Dexter is genuinely the prey rather than the predator, and the show commits to it properly. He's moving through a space designed for pursuit. Lower floors, stairwells, a room full of mannequins that creates confusion in the dark. Speltzer knows the space, Dexter doesn't. The physical disparity is real and the show doesn't minimize it. Speltzer is larger and stronger and in his element, and Dexter's advantages, the planning and preparation and methodical research, are entirely absent. He has nothing in that warehouse except the ability to move fast and the presence of mind not to stop. There's a specific kind of discomfort in watching Dexter genuinely frightened. He doesn't experience fear the way most people do. The emotional landscape is different, flatter, and the show is consistent about this. But there's a moment in the warehouse where what he feels reads very clearly as fear, and the camera holds on it. And then Speltzer catches him on the roof, and Dexter jumps down to a lower level and catches a passing truck and escapes, while Speltzer watches from the roofline. The choice not to chase further is deliberate. He tried to kill Dexter, but Dexter escaped. This was a message. The note he left, run, and then watching Dexter read stay, and then being knocked out from behind with a shovel, is the whole arc of the Speltzer situation in miniature. Two people playing a game with notes, except one of them is considerably better at it, and the better one turns out to be Dexter, but only just. The second approach is more careful. Dexter waits, he watches, he leaves Speltzer a note of his own, left on a pile of dirt in the cemetery, that says stay. And when Speltzer bends down to read it, Dexter knocks him out from behind with a shovel. The kill room for Speltzer is a crematorium. Dexter has chosen the venue with intention, and it's apparent in the setup. Speltzer strapped to a cremation table, the flames visible through the chamber door, the heat. He's furious, he screams. He calls Dexter a freak. Dexter calmly yells back in his face, which is a genuinely funny moment, actually. Not a joke, but Dexter's complete and unconcerned willingness to match Speltzer's energy for about 3 seconds before going back to his normal register. Then Dexter tells Speltzer something he doesn't tell anyone else during this period. He says he'd normally slice his cheek with a scalpel and take a blood slide, but he can't risk anyone finding a blood slide ever again. This is in the wake of the La Guertu investigation from the Travis Marshall blood slide dropped at the church the season before. He changes the ritual because he has to. The memory of killing Speltzer will have to be enough. And then he stabs him in the heart and puts him in the cremation chamber. He burns the blood slide box too. That detail is worth pausing on. The whole box, years of slides, every kill he'd documented with that one careful drop of blood, destroyed. It's a kind of loss alongside the closure, the ritual he'd built and maintained, the archive of everything he'd done since he was in his 20s. Gone, because of a dropped slide at a church and a detective who found it. The Speltzer kill is the first time the ritual directly costs him something, and the cost is the ritual itself. There's something almost theological about burning the box in the same fire as Speltzer. Like the archive and the person it documented are disposed of together. A kind of completion, even if it's not the completion Dexter would have chosen. He doesn't seem destroyed by it. He seems, if anything, lighter, which is its own interesting observation about what the box meant to him and whether it was serving the purpose he thought it was. The Deborah dimension of the Speltzer arc is also worth a moment. She's been watching Speltzer walk free. She's been watching a man who killed women stand at their funerals with a smirk. She's a police lieutenant who has built her entire adult identity around the law being enough. The system working if you work it right, justice being accessible through proper channels. Speltzer is a direct challenge to that belief, and the challenge succeeds. The system genuinely failed, and the person who corrected the failure is her brother, whom she is increasingly unable to hate as straightforwardly as she would prefer. The "did you do this for me?" no exchange only works because of everything that season has already established. Dexter isn't lying. He didn't do it for her exactly. He did it because Speltzer was on his list. But he also called her after and waited outside and let her see the smoke. He knew what it would mean to her. He just won't claim it as an act of love because Dexter doesn't quite have that language. Human is as close as he gets, and somehow that's enough. That exchange is one of the best pieces of writing in the whole series, I think. It's not sentimental, it's not triumphant. It's just two people standing in a car park watching a crematorium chimney and admitting something quietly true. The Speltzer kill is probably the most cathartic single kill in the show, and the crematorium scene is the most honest moment in Season 7. Season 8 is the final season of the original run, and if it's complicated in its execution, and it is, the ending is famously divisive, it does contain one kill that is almost perfectly constructed in its simplicity. Aitliver Saxun, also known as Daniel Vogel, also known as the brain surgeon. Dr. Evelyn Vogel is introduced in Season 8 as a neuropsychiatrist who arrives in Miami claiming to have been targeted by a serial killer who leaves brain matter at her door. She is, it turns out, not a random victim. She is someone who knew Harry, who worked with Harry, and who helped Harry develop the code that has structured Dexter's entire life. She is, in a meaningful sense, one of the architects of what Dexter is. The show calls her the mother of all psychopaths, which is a dramatic way of putting it, but not inaccurate. Her real son, Daniel, who she and her late husband had placed in a psychiatric facility in England when he was 14 after he drowned his younger brother, turns out to not be dead despite the official record. He faked his death in a facility fire and has been living under the alias Aitliver Saxun. He's been killing in Miami for reasons connected to his mother, leaving pieces of brain for her as a kind of message, trying to establish contact with the woman who had him institutionalized. There's a horrible psychodynamic logic to it that Evelyn doesn't want to fully face until she has no choice. Aitliver Saxun is intelligent and calm and very good at presenting as completely reasonable until he isn't. He kills Evelyn. He shoots Deborah in a storage unit that Dexter was using, leaving her with a gut wound that she survives initially, but that leads to a stroke during surgery and her death in the final episode. So by the time Dexter has Aitliver Saxun, he's carrying the full weight of Deborah's condition, and he does something that Season 8 Dexter, who has been trying throughout the season to question whether he could be something other than what he is, whether a future with Hannah and Harrison in Argentina was possible, would not have done earlier in the season. He leaves Saxon alive after their confrontation. He turns him over to Miami Metro. He does the right thing in a certain reading, but Saxon has Dexter's address and he knows Miami Metro is interested in Dexter and there's still a loose end. Miami Metro puts Dexter and Saxon in an interrogation room together with a uniformed officer just outside and leaves them briefly. The officer is distracted. It's intentional, or it seems intentional, or maybe it's just the universe offering Dexter a door that's very slightly open. Dexter kills Aitliver Saxun with a pen. That's it. That's the whole thing. He picks up the pen from the table and he stabs him in the neck with it and watches him bleed out on the interrogation room floor. Then he tells the interviewing detective calmly that Saxon made a move on him and he defended himself, and the detective believes him because the camera footage confirms the movement even if it doesn't quite show what happened. Batistu and Quinn watch the footage played back, Saxon falling, the clean, simple result. What I find remarkable about this kill is how perfectly it suits where Dexter is at that point in the story. He's past ritual, he's past the elaborate setup, the plastic, the photographs, the ceremonial weight of it all. He has a pen and a few minutes and a reason, and he uses them. It's not satisfying in the theatrical way that Speltzer was satisfying, or in the emotional way that Arthur Mitchell was. It's satisfying in the way that absolute efficiency is sometimes satisfying. No excess, no drama, a pen. The Season 8 finale is a complicated piece of television for a lot of reasons, and I won't try to relitigate all of it here. There are definitely other videos to be made about the original ending versus what New Blood retroactively did to it. But the pen kill is the last great kill of the original series, and it's one of those moments where the show does exactly what it needs to do in exactly the right amount of time. Which that late in the run is harder than it sounds. The Evelyn Vogel dimension of Season 8 had something genuinely new to the mythology, which is worth noting. Until Season 8, Harry was believed to be the only architect of the code. Harry and Dr. Evelyn Vogel built it around Dexter, guided it, embodied it through all those flashbacks and Dexter's imagined conversations with him. Vogel arriving and saying, "I helped him build that, I was there, I contributed to what you are." reframes the origin in a complicated way. Harry wasn't quite as alone in his decision as the show had implied. He had a professional collaborator who saw Dexter as, among other things, a fascinating case study. Vogel's motivations are layered. She does care about Dexter in the genuine but clinical way of someone who has built a career studying people like him and found one she actually likes, and her failure to fully reckon with what her own son Daniel became, the decision to have him institutionalized, the lie about his death, the years of not knowing or not looking, is the thing that catches up with her. She brought the brain surgeon problem to Miami in a sense, by creating the conditions for Daniel to become what he became. The show isn't heavy-handed about this, but it's there. Saxon killing Vogel is the cost of that history. And Dexter killing Saxon with a pen is the show refusing to dignify the revenge with ceremony. No ritual, no conversation at length, no photographs, just a man in an interrogation room and whatever happens to be on the table. New Blood begins in winter, which is the first signal that this is a different kind of Dexter story. The show had always been Miami, heat, humidity, the constant ambient energy of a city running hot. New Blood is set in Iron Lake, a small town in upstate New York in November. Snow on the ground, cold air, deer in the woods, everything compressed and still. Dexter has been living here for approximately 2 years under the name Jim Lindsay. He works in a sporting goods store. He has a girlfriend, Angela, who is the local chief of police, which is either irony or compulsion, depending on how you want to read it. He is, by all available evidence, not killing. He attends a support group, for anger, officially. He has apparently managed to sit on his dark passenger for 10 years, through a combination of isolation and genuine effort, and perhaps the fact that Iron Lake doesn't offer much in the way of obvious targets. The first kill in New Blood happens in the first episode, and it happens because of a white deer. Iron Lake has a protected white deer, the town mascot essentially, a rare white-coated buck that the community has a genuine attachment to. Matt Caldwell is the son of Kurt Caldwell, Iron Lake's most prominent citizen, and Matt is the kind of person who finds entitled impulsiveness more or less irresistible. He shoots the deer in front of Dexter on Dexter's own land because he can and because he wants to. When Dexter confronts him about it, Matt is unrepentant, in the specific way of someone who has never had a real consequence in his life. His father has money, his father has influence. Things like this don't stick to him. Dexter's dark passenger stirs. And then Matt says something particularly stupid, and Dexter knocks him out with the rifle he's been carrying through the woods, and the 10-year streak ends. The kill itself is fairly unglamorous by the standards of what we've been through. No elaborate setup, a plastic sheet or two, a dismemberment, and the body hidden in bags under the fire pit in the back garden. It's almost embarrassingly practical. Dexter was not prepared for this. He hadn't planned for this. He did it because the situation presented itself, and he couldn't stop himself. And the show is honest about that. This isn't a code kill in the traditional sense. Matt Caldwell was unpleasant and entitled, but Dexter killed him over a deer and a remark, not because he'd verified a pattern of harm. The show doesn't let Dexter off the hook for this, which is the right call. He works through various rationalizations over the following episodes. Matt was dangerous, Matt was going to hurt someone eventually, people like Matt always do, and none of them quite land, including to Dexter himself. He knows what the code requires, he knows what he did. The two things don't align, and the fact that Kurt Caldwell turns out to be a genuine monster doesn't retroactively make the Matt kill a code kill. Dexter was lucky that he killed the son of a serial predator, rather than just an ordinary person with an irritating personality. He didn't know that when he did it. This is part of what New Blood is examining. Dexter without Harry's oversight, without the careful framework of surveillance and certainty that Harry built around the process. Harry's code required patience and verification and restraint. Dexter in Iron Lake, after a decade of suppression, doesn't have full access to that patience. The Matt kill shows that the code needs not just the right criteria, but the psychological infrastructure to enforce those criteria. And that infrastructure degrades without maintenance. That uncomfortable truth hangs over everything that follows in New Blood. Dexter keeps telling himself that Matt deserved it, that Matt was going to hurt someone eventually, that this was the right thing. He's not entirely wrong. The Caldwell family turns out to be deeply monstrous once the season gets going. But the Matt kill isn't a code kill, and Dexter knows it, and the show is honest about what it means that the first thing Dexter does when the urge returns is to fall short of his own standard. What makes the Matt Caldwell kill compelling rather than uncomfortable, and it is both, is the context around it. Kurt Caldwell mobilizes the entire town to search for his son. Teams of people tramp across the woods calling Matt's name. And Dexter stands among them, helping with the search, drinking coffee at the fire pit above the bags. It's the kind of dark comedy the show could never quite do in Miami because Miami was always too hot, too immediate. Iron Lake is quiet enough that you can notice the absurdity. Matt's absence wakes something up in Kurt that becomes the season's main engine. He knows his son is dead. He doesn't know how, but he knows. And whatever was already happening in the Caldwell family, whatever Kurt had been doing in the woods and in his cabin and in the bunker under it, starts moving in Dexter's direction. The Iron Lake setting is doing a lot of work in New Blood that isn't always fully appreciated. Everything about it, the cold, the quiet, the small-town social fabric where everyone knows everyone, is designed to make Dexter's suppression believable. Miami was never going to work as a place where someone like Dexter could stop. Too much happening, too many targets, too many opportunities. Iron Lake is the closest thing to no opportunity as the show could construct while still keeping Dexter in a comprehensible human world. The 10 years of not killing is the central conceit of New Blood, and the show builds a picture of what that looks like psychologically without overdoing the exposition. Dexter attends the support group. He counts the days. He has a jar of candy in his office at the general store. One piece for every day clean, an almost literal version of the NA metaphor he was using in Season 2. He's doing the work, genuinely, and it has clearly cost something. He's quieter than the Dexter of Miami, more careful, more contained. The voice is still there, but it runs quieter. Matt Caldwell breaks through all of that, and the thing the show is honest about is that it doesn't take much. One genuinely infuriating person on your land, one piece of specific, unrepentant arrogance, and 10 years unravels in about 30 seconds. The dark passenger doesn't retire. It waits. The Matt kill is a first domino, and the show is very aware that it's presenting a Dexter who is less in control, less righteous, less code compliant than the character we'd come to know. That's an interesting choice, and it's the right one. Dexter in Iron Lake is a decade older and still exactly the same, and the first thing he does when the urge returns is make a mistake. That's probably accurate. Kurt Caldwell is, in some respects, the most disturbing villain in the extended Dexter franchise. Not because of what he does, but because of the gap between who the town thinks he is and what he actually is. He funds community events. He buys rounds at the bar. He's on every volunteer committee, visible at every local crisis, the first person Iron Lake calls when something goes wrong. He is, by every apparent measure, the kind of man a small town builds itself around. The parallels to Arthur Mitchell are obvious, and New Blood knows they're obvious. It doesn't hide them, but it also doesn't overplay them. Both men maintain a public face of generosity and community investment. Both commit their murders in private, with a ritual logic that only makes sense inside their own psychology. Both have a specific type of victim. Both have been doing it for decades without being caught, relying on the goodwill their public face generates, and in Kurt's case, the isolation of his geography. But there are meaningful differences. Arthur had a family that feared him, children who knew on some level what their father was, a wife who had suppressed and normalized what she knew for decades. Kurt is more isolated. His connection is to the town as an institution rather than to specific people who love him. He's generous because generosity is useful, because it builds a web of goodwill and social capital that makes him seem inconceivable as a suspect. In Iron Lake, no one looks at Kurt Caldwell and thinks, this man has a bunker. No one thinks, this man has been doing this for 25 years. The community regard is armor, and it's been working perfectly. The discovery of the bunker, Dexter and Harrison crawling into the underground space near Kurt's cabin, finding 30 preserved bodies, the surgical equipment, the whole hidden infrastructure of what Kurt is one of the more affecting moments in New Blood precisely because of what those 30 preserved women represent. 25 years, 30 individual lives, and Kurt's justification when he eventually has to give one is that he was saving them from worse fates, that they were runaways headed nowhere, and he gave them something, some attention, some care before the end. It's the most self-serving possible framing, and Kurt seems to fully believe it, which is its own specific horror. Dexter finds all of this out gradually as the season progresses. What also becomes apparent over the same period is that Harrison knows. Harrison, Dexter's son, now a teenager, who found Dexter in Iron Lake after years of not knowing whether his father was alive, has been putting pieces together from the moment he arrived. He witnessed his mother's murder as a baby. He grew up carrying something dark that no one around him understood or named properly. Meeting Dexter doesn't resolve that, it contextualizes it. And Harrison, once he understands what his father is, wants to participate. Not in a gleeful way, not in the way Miguel Prado wanted to. In the way of someone who has spent years feeling like a monster for having a dark passenger of his own, and has finally found someone who might understand it. The Kurt Caldwell kill involves both of them. Dexter and Harrison locate the bunker, trigger the alert system intentionally to draw Kurt back, and later capture him at his lodge. They bring him to his own underground room, surrounded by his own preserved victims. They strap him to the surgical table in his own kill space. Dexter tells Harrison he's done this in the hundreds, which Harrison receives as reassurance, as evidence that his father has purpose and method rather than chaos. Kurt wakes up and tries to justify himself. He says he was saving the women, that they were runaways heading nowhere, that he gave them shelter and care before the end. He says this to a room containing 30 of them preserved as trophies and doesn't seem to hear how it sounds. He also tells Harrison as a last card to play that Dexter killed Matt, and that's why he tried to burn down their cabin. He's trying to create a wedge. It doesn't work. Dexter kills him. Harrison watches. What happens immediately after is the thing. Harrison sees the blood. He's been building toward this. He helped plan it, he was present, he thought he wanted to be here for it. And the sight of it triggers something he wasn't expecting. A flashback to his mother, Rita, in the bathtub. Harrison sitting in her blood as a toddler. The image he has been carrying his entire life, surfacing in his father's kill room in front of his father's most recent kill. He goes outside to get some air. The structural echo is intentional and devastating. Dexter stands over Kurt Caldwell the same way Arthur Mitchell stood over Rita, which is to say in complete disconnection from what the blood might mean to the people around him. He brought his son into this space the same way Harry brought him into it. He thought he was offering understanding, and he offered instead the same inheritance he'd spent years trying to avoid passing on. Harrison getting a dark passenger from watching his mother die. Harrison potentially getting a darker one from watching his father work. The comparison to Harry is the sharpest thing New Blood does. Harry made a decision, looking at what Dexter was becoming, that shaping it was better than suppressing it or denying it. He helped build the code. He trained Dexter. He created something that functioned for a long time before it broke. Dexter makes the same decision about Harrison, recognizing the dark passenger, deciding that guiding it is better than pretending it isn't there, and arrives at the same problem Harry did, which is that you cannot fully control what you've shaped. You can only watch it go. The season resolves this with Harrison shooting Dexter, which is its own complicated business. But the Kurt Caldwell kill is the pivot point. It's the moment where New Blood says what it came to say about legacy and repetition, and the thing that gets passed down even when you try to stop it. The bunker full of victims, the preserved room, the surgical table. It's all too much like Dexter's own ritual viewed from a certain angle, and the show is deliberately asking you to notice that. Whether the Kurt kill is satisfying in the same way the others are is an interesting question. It resolves the season's main threat. Kurt deserved to die. He was a genuine monster by any measure, and unlike Matt, his code compliance is not in question. But the satisfaction is undermined by what it costs Harrison and by what it reveals about what Dexter actually is versus who he'd been trying to be in Iron Lake. The kill works, the ritual works, and that's almost the problem. We've covered the big ones, but there are a handful of kills that didn't get their own sections and feel slightly wrong to skip entirely. So let's just move through a few of these at an easy pace. First, Santos Jimenez, who gets killed in Season 2 in what might be the most personally motivated kill Dexter carries out in the entire original run. Santos Jimenez was one of the men who killed Dexter and Brian's mother, Laura Moeser, in that shipping container when Dexter was 3 years old. He was the one with the chainsaw. Dexter tracks him down, and the kill is quiet, but loaded with everything that backstory carries. It's different from the others because it's not about the code in the conventional sense. It's about the thing that existed before the code, the wound that Harry built the code around. There's no speech, no photographs on the wall, just a man Dexter has known about his whole life and a resolution that comes too simply to feel complete, which is probably accurate. Then there's Stan Liddy in Season 5, a disgraced cop hired by Quinn to surveil Dexter, who has gathered enough evidence on Dexter's boat-based activity to be genuinely dangerous. The Liddy kill is a cramped, urgent, nothing like the ritual kill that happens inside Liddy's van when Liddy ambushes him. There's barely room to move. It's a knife, close quarters, survival rather than ritual. Liddy isn't a monster in the code sense. He's a compromised cop doing something illegal, which muddies the code compliance considerably. The show doesn't really stop to engage with that, which I find slightly honest. Dexter kills him because he has to, not because he's constructed a moral case. Nurse Mary, from Dexter, Original Sin, is worth a mention as the first proper code kill, or very close to it. Original Sin is the prequel series set in 1991 Miami, following young Dexter as a forensic intern under Harry's guidance. Nurse Mary is a hospital nurse who has been quietly poisoning patients, including Harry, who is ill in hospital, and Dexter discovers what she is while doing exactly the kind of careful evidence gathering that Harry taught him. He keeps her earrings as trophies before the blood slide ritual is formalized. It's the beginning of everything in a sense, and there's something interesting about watching a kill that is methodical and premeditated and correct, but still clearly not yet the full ritual, like seeing a practice run of something that will later become an institution. The Tony Ferrer kill in Original Sin is worth mentioning alongside it, as one of Dexter's earliest kills in that series. Ferrer being a loan shark responsible for the deaths of a family. Young Dexter is still developing his code at this point, still navigating Harry's reluctant guidance, and the kills feel different in texture from the confident ritual of the original series. More uncertain, more improvised, which makes sense. This is Dexter learning what he is rather than already knowing. And then there's a kill that doesn't belong to Dexter at all, but that deserves a line here. LaGuertu's death at the end of Season 7 at Deborah's hand. Maria LaGuertu has been pursuing the Bay Harbor butcher case with genuine intelligence and genuine conviction all season. She's not wrong. She figures it out. She gets Dexter and Deborah in a shipping container with a gun, and Deborah, faced with a moment where the only options are watching her brother die or shooting LaGuerta, shoots LaGuerta. It's not Dexter's kill, it's Deborah's, and it costs her enormously. She was a police lieutenant, she shot a police captain, she crossed the line she'd spent her entire adult life defining herself by not crossing. She did it because she loved her brother. The LaGuertu kill isn't satisfying in the way the others are. It's devastating. But it's on this list because it's one of the most important kills in the series, and it belongs in a conversation about what the show eventually asked of everyone around Dexter, not just Dexter himself. Since we're on the topic of the supporting cast and what they had to carry, it's worth a moment on Deborah just briefly because she's part of what makes so many of these kills register the way they do. Jennifer Carpenter's performance across the whole run is remarkable and frequently underappreciated. Deborah is the show's moral compass even after the compass gets badly bent. Every kill Dexter makes has Deborah somewhere in the background, as a reason he has to stay hidden, as a conscience he doesn't have himself, as the person whose opinion matters most in a life he's otherwise spent keeping everyone at a safe distance from. The Speltzer crematorium scene, the Season 6 church, the LaGuerta shipping container, those are all Deborah scenes as much as Dexter scenes, and they're better for it. And since we're on the topic of kills that resonate beyond the immediate moment, the Santos Jimenez kill in Season 2 deserves more than a passing mention, actually. Santos Jimenez was one of the men responsible for the murder of Dexter and Brian's mother in that shipping container. He wasn't an abstract villain. He was a specific person Dexter could name, connected to the specific worst thing that ever happened to him. Dexter had to track him down. Jimenez had moved on, built a small life somewhere in the Florida wetlands, was running a methamphetamine operation when Dexter found him. The kill is quiet, methodical. Jimenez, once he understands what's happening, tries to claim he was just doing a job, which is the kind of defense that lands exactly as well as you'd expect. What makes the Jimenez kill unusual is that it doesn't follow Harry's code in the way most of the others do. Jimenez is guilty, yes, but Dexter did find him through an investigation, but not by noticing a pattern of ongoing harm. He found him because he was looking for him specifically, because of something that happened 30 years ago, because it was personal in a way the code wasn't designed to accommodate. Harry would have told him not to do it. Harry is dead by the time it happens, though. Dexter is operating in Season 2 without that voice of restraint in the room, only the imagined version of it. And the imagined version loses that argument. There's also a small group of early kills in the prequel material, Original Sin, that are interesting precisely for what they're not yet. Young Dexter is building the ritual rather than executing it. Nurse Mary was the first proper kill, the first time Harry gave explicit permission and Dexter understood what the code was for. Tony Ferrer, the loan shark, was early enough that Dexter was still making decisions that Harry hadn't sanctioned, still figuring out where the line was. Those kills are tentative in a way the later ones never are. The certainty hasn't been established yet. The ritual is still being assembled. Watching Original Sin is, in part, watching the construction of everything we spent the original series taking for granted. The Levi Reed kill in Original Sin, Dexter's third victim, the one where he acknowledged internally that he was now, by definition, a serial killer, is worth a mention for exactly that reason. It's the moment the psychological label gets applied. Dexter has been telling himself various things up to this point about what he's doing and why. Killing Levi Reed closes the escape route. He knows what he is after that. Original Sin is partly about watching someone arrive at a self-understanding they'll spend the rest of their life managing, and that kill is the arrival point. One more worth a brief note is the kill of Juan Reynes, a pimp who killed a woman Harry had investigated in a case that went cold. One of Harry's failures, a man who walked because of insufficient evidence. In a flashback sequence in Season 2, Dexter is shown having killed Reynes essentially to close something Harry couldn't close. It's the clearest example in the original series of the code being applied retrospectively, not to an ongoing threat but to an unresolved injustice. Harry's ghost of inadequacy addressed by his son. There's something both tender and slightly unnerving about that, which is very Dexter as a franchise and very Harry as a character. Harry carries a weight through all of this that the show handles thoughtfully across all the seasons and the prequel. He's been dead since Season 2, technically, present only as Dexter's internal voice, a projection built from memory. But what Original Sin shows is that the real Harry was more complicated than the construction Dexter built from him. He made moral compromises. He chose a path for Dexter that was partly about giving Dexter the best available life and partly about his own guilt and his own need to make something right out of something he couldn't have prevented. The code is Harry's gift and Harry's burden and Harry's rationalization all at once. Watching young Dexter receive it in Original Sin, knowing everything the original series revealed about where it leads, is one of the stranger and more affecting viewing experiences the franchise offers. All of which is to say, there's a lot more to talk about than one video can hold. The kills are one thread, the mythology is another, the family psychology is another entirely. The franchise has been running since 2006 and it's still producing material worth engaging with, which is a remarkable thing for any television property. So, we've been through quite a few rooms tonight, a crematorium in Miami, a baggage claim in an airport, a church somebody set on fire, an underground bunker in upstate New York, a series of rented industrial spaces wrapped in plastic. We've covered quite a stretch of television narrative. 8 original seasons, a prequel, a revival, a cast of antagonists that ranges from a manipulative ADA to a 30-year predator hiding behind a charitable foundation. I hope it's been good company. What I find myself thinking about, having gone through all of this in one sitting, is how much of the appeal of Dexter comes down to the voiceover. Michael C. Hall narrating Dexter's interior life is the show's most essential ingredient. More than the kills, more than the Miami backdrop, more than any particular villain or season arc. Because the kills work because you know what Dexter is thinking. You know why he makes each decision, what he feels, or what passes in him for feeling. You're inside his head for every single moment of every season. That's an enormous amount of intimacy with a character who, if you step back and thought about it rationally, should be completely alienating. That's the trick the show pulls off. The intimacy, the voice in your ears, calm and intelligent and dry and just occasionally sincere in a way that catches you off guard. It's not a stretch to say that part of why Dexter works as sleep content is that the voiceover was always a bedtime story tone wrapped around content that had no business being soothing. He'd be watching someone through a window and thinking, at considerable narrative length, about whether this person fit his criteria, whether the evidence was sufficient, whether Harry would approve. And you'd be along for it, completely comfortable, which is an interesting thing to be. The other ingredient the show gets consistently right, in its better seasons at least, is the gap between what Dexter presents and what he is. He reads as ordinary. He reads as a pleasant, slightly awkward, professionally competent man who is good with children and a bit hopeless at normal emotional expression. He brings pastries to the office. He takes his stepchildren to amusement parks. He worries about whether Harrison is sleeping well. And underneath all of that, there is a person who, by his own count, has killed over 100 people and kept a record of many of them in a small wooden box. The show's entire audience is complicit in that gap. We know what's under the surface, and we find it reassuring rather than threatening, because the show has carefully constructed the code and the ritual and the voiceover to make us feel like we understand it. We're not horrified by Dexter in the way we'd be horrified by an actual person in his position. We're comfortable. We check in with him the way you check in with a friend. It's a strange relationship to have with a television character, and the show earns it through consistency. Dexter never betrays the internal logic. The voiceover never loses its register. The code never becomes something the show secretly endorses without qualification. It's a tightrope, and the show walked it for a very long time. There's a version of this discussion where we spend time on whether Dexter glorifies what it depicts, and I don't think that framing is particularly useful. But I do think it's worth acknowledging that the show was doing something complicated and mostly doing it well. The code, the ritual, the voiceover, none of those things are accidents. They work together to produce a viewing experience that's genuinely difficult to categorize. Not horror, not thriller, not procedural, not quite drama in the conventional sense. It sits in its own register, and it found an enormous audience there. The fact that the franchise is still going, Resurrection continuing in 2025 and beyond, a Trinity killer prequel in development, suggests that the audience's relationship with Dexter Morgan hasn't finished running its course yet, which makes a certain sense. The questions the show raises don't resolve cleanly, and characters that raise unresolvable questions tend to have a long tail. The box is the thing I keep coming back to, even now after going through all of these kills in detail, all the psychology, all the code, all the complexity of who Dexter is and what the dark passenger means and what Harry did or didn't do right. All of it condenses somehow into that small wooden box of glass slides. Dexter usually keeps one drop of blood from his planned victims. Every life ended under the code, archived on glass. It's both a trophy and a confession and a kind of obsessive documentation, and it's entirely private. Several people know about the blood slide box. The blood slide box is known to Dexter, Dokes, Deborah, the FBI, and Leon Prater. When he burns it at the crematorium with Speltzer, when the box goes into the same fire as the man who made him burn it, there's a grief there that the show doesn't spell out and doesn't need to. Something is ending. The blood slide habit he built, the documentation he'd been keeping, the record that only existed for himself, all of it ends with that fire. And what replaces it is the memory. The memory of killing you will have to be enough, he tells Speltzer, which is, in its way, the same thing he has to tell himself. The show is at its best when it's asking questions that don't resolve. Not, is Dexter good or bad? That's not a useful question about someone this psychologically specific. But questions like, what does conscience actually require when the legal system fails? What does a person owe to the people they love when the thing they are is genuinely dangerous? Can a framework built around harm actually prevent it, or does it just organize it? Harry thought he was creating a solution. Dexter spent 30 years implementing it and arrived at a snow-covered town in upstate New York, living alone, working at a local hunting and fishing store. That's not quite failure, but it's also not what Harry envisioned. And then Harrison arrives, and the jar means nothing, and it all starts again, as it always does. Now, there's plenty more Dexter territory to cover in future videos. The franchise has more threads than one video can hold. I'm thinking about the season antagonists and what each one was really doing thematically, the mythology of the Dark Passenger and what the show actually committed to across the whole franchise, the original Sin prequel in more detail, and how young Dexter compares to the character we spent the original run with. The Dexter, Resurrection continuation, and where the franchise seems to be heading. There's a lot there. One thing that connects all the kills we've gone through tonight, even the ones that don't follow the ritual, even the improvised ones and the ones laced with grief, is a kind of moral seriousness about consequence. Dexter's kills have consequences. Lila dies because of what she chose to do. Miguel dies because of what he chose to do with something he was given. Arthur dies because he killed for 30 years and eventually the person he'd wronged most found him. The code isn't a perfect instrument. Matt Caldwell showed that, and the early kills in Original Sin showed that. But it's pointed in the right direction. There's something in the show that refuses to let killing be consequence-free even when the person being killed is definitively guilty. And that something is what keeps the whole thing from collapsing into simple, vigilante fantasy. Something else the show does that doesn't always get acknowledged. It ages Dexter. Not visibly, not with gray hair and slowing reflexes, but psychologically. The Dexter of Season 7 is quieter than the Dexter of Season 1, more guarded, heavier in ways that don't announce themselves. The ritual is the same, but the person inside it has accumulated things. Deborah's knowledge, Rita's death, Harrison's existence, the blood slide box and its replacement absence. He is, by Season 8, someone who has been living with what he is for a very long time, and you can hear it in the voiceover if you're listening. The kills don't resolve anything for him anymore. They just continue, which is probably the most honest thing the show ever said about him. The show is about a lot of things, family and what it does to you, whether a person is the sum of their trauma or something slightly apart from it, whether a framework built around harm can actually prevent it or just organize it differently. Whether any amount of intelligence and discipline and carefully maintained routine is enough to keep the Dark Passenger quiet. The kills are how all of that gets argued out, one plastic-wrapped room at a time. And the reason they satisfy when they do is because the show has done the work to make you care about the argument. If you've enjoyed this, there's more where it came from. The mythology alone is worth hours. But for now, that's us done for the evening. Wherever you are, I hope you're comfortable. Sleep well.